Howdy folks, this is Western author Mark L. Redmond, back with another installment in my First Chapters series. You'll notice a different background behind me. I'm coming to you from my new office, new to me, in Angola, Indiana. Susie and I are spending the summer visiting our kids and grandkids, and then we'll return to Arizona in September. This book is not brand new. It's my most recent book, but I've been a little slow in posting this video. So it actually came out about 6 months ago. But the book is Bounty Hunter Nate Landry, Dangerous Disguises. And it's the fourth one in the series. Just to give you an idea of what the book's about, here's the back cover copy. In book 4 of the series, Nate and Wolf find themselves facing a gang of outlaws who use the skills they learned in the theater to aid them in pulling off their robberies. Disguised as people nobody would notice, they slip into a town or onto a stagecoach and blend in with the folks around them. These outlaws plan their robberies and commit their crimes and change their appearance so skillfully no one has been able to apprehend them. In addition, Leah Fulton, the Dust Devil, is back, looking for revenge on Nate and Wolf, whom she blames for the death of their brother. As good as Nate and Wolf are at their jobs, they're not too proud to accept help, even from some unlikely sources. In addition to a town marshal and his deputy with whom they've worked in the past, the bounty hunters are joined by a Pinkerton agent and a woman who runs a boarding house. Hang on to your hat, partner. This ride might get a little wild. And now here's Chapter 1 of Bounty Hunter Nate Landry, Dangerous Disguises. "Are you tired of my company?" Katie Whitman asked. She sat across the table from me, holding her coffee cup in both hands. I noticed a hint of a smile on her lips as I nearly choked on a mouthful of biscuit. I had to wash the biscuit down with a swallow of coffee before I could reply. We were the only people left at the table, but I glanced around to be sure the dining room was empty. "What?" I asked. "No, ma'am. Katie, why would you ask me that?" I had been a guest at Mrs. Whitman's boarding house for almost 2 weeks on my second stay. A few months earlier, Wolf had brought me to her place after I'd been shot, and I had stayed until the doctor thought I was fit to ride a horse. This time, I had come to spend some time with Katie. "You haven't spoken for a quarter of an hour," she said. Katie was smiling now, but I saw concern in her eyes. "I was eating my delicious breakfast," I said, "and I don't reckon I could ever get tired of your company." "But you're leaving soon," she said. "I wish you'd stay." 4 years ago, when I'd lost my wife Elizabeth and our newborn baby at the same time, I had locked the door to my heart. I hadn't found a reason to reopen it again. Then Katie had come along. I couldn't explain how she did it, but she opened that door, walked into my heart, and made herself at home. "I wish I could stay," I said, "but I have work to do." I had been looking at my plate. When I looked at Katie, she was still smiling, but her beautiful brown eyes were brimming with tears. She blinked them away, stood, and began to clear the table. Picking up my plate, fork, and cup, I followed her to the kitchen. "What can I do to help?" I asked. She filled 2 cups with coffee and set them on a silver tray, along with a plate of biscuits, some butter, and a small cup of honey. "A man and his wife arrived late last night," she said. "They asked if they could sleep through breakfast but still have coffee and biscuits." She added 2 napkins, a knife, 2 spoons, and 2 forks to the tray. Would you please take this tray to the last room on the left? I reckon they're awake by now." "Yes, ma'am," I said. I'm not often surprised, because I plan carefully and think through the situations I face when I'm tracking someone. Delivering a breakfast tray was a simple task that required neither thinking nor planning. I carried the tray to the end of the hallway and tapped on the door. When a woman opened it, I almost dropped the tray. I was looking into the eyes of Leah Fulton. The look on her face told me she was just as surprised as I was. Before I could speak, Leah grabbed the tray and kicked the door shut, and as I reached for the knob, I heard the lock click. When I entered the kitchen, Katie was washing the breakfast dishes. She spoke without turning around. "Thank you for delivering breakfast to the Carsons," she said. "I don't usually serve breakfast to folks in their rooms, but they seemed like nice people, and they were so tired last night that I thought—" She had picked up a towel and was wiping a plate as she turned toward me. Her smile disappeared. "Nate," she said, "what's wrong?" I picked up my hat and started toward the door. "I'll explain when I get back," I said. "I need to talk to the marshal." When I walked into the house 10 minutes later, Katie had finished washing the dishes and wiping the table. She stopped, hung the cloth over the back of a chair, and motioned toward the parlor with one hand. "Can we sit while you tell me what's happened?" she asked. She led me to a settee and sat beside me, turned so she was facing me. "You look as if you've seen a ghost," she said. "Not a ghost," I said. "A dust devil." Katie listened without interrupting as I told her about Tom and Leah Fulton. When I had finished, she whispered, "Why is she here?" "I don't know," I said, "but I reckon I'm going to find out." "Shouldn't we wait till Marshal Becker gets here?" she asked. "He's not coming," I replied. "He wasn't in his office." When I stood, Katie grabbed my arm with both hands. "What are you doing?" she asked. I lifted my arm slightly and stepped back, pulling Katie to her feet. "I'm going back to her room," I said. "I'm going to take Leah Fulton, and most likely the man who's with her, to the jail. If the marshal isn't back yet, I'll lock them up myself." Katie was still holding onto my arm. "Aren't they dangerous?" she asked. I covered her hands with one of mine. "She is," I said, "and I reckon he is too if he's traveling with her. That's why I want to get her out of your house." She let go of my arm and looked up at me. "I want to help," she said. "Let me get my gun." Katie walked out of the parlor, and when she returned, she was carrying a new Colt revolver. She looked nervous but determined. "What I need you to do," I said, "is stay here, pray, and keep your gun ready." "I can do that," she whispered. "Please be careful." "I will," I said. I smiled at her. "I don't want to break something and have you add its cost to my bill." When I knocked at the door to Leah's room, I stood to one side. Sometimes when people don't want to have company, they fire a weapon through the door instead of opening it. Since I've never enjoyed being shot, I try to stay out of the way. Nobody shot through the door. Nobody opened it either. I knocked again, but I still got no response. I turned the knob and pushed, but the door was still locked. Because I didn't want to have the cost of a broken door added to my bill, I turned and walked toward the parlor. "Don't shoot, Katie," I said. "It's only me." She stood just outside the parlor, holding her gun with both hands, with it pointed at the floor. Her hands trembled a little, but she still had a determined look on her face. She let out her breath as if she'd been holding it for a long time. "I need a key," I said. Without speaking, Katie hurried away. When she returned a minute later, she dropped a key into my outstretched hand and stepped back, still holding her revolver. At the door, I slid the key into the lock and turned it as quietly as I could, again standing to one side. After turning the knob, I pushed on the door. As it swung open without making a sound, I whispered my thanks to Katie for keeping the hinges greased. Holding my 6-gun at arm's length to cover the room, I stepped inside. What I found, or I should say what I didn't find, was no surprise. The room was empty. A pale blue curtain danced in the breeze that came through the open window. Fresh scuff marks on the sill told me how Leah and her friend had left the room. Lowering the hammer on my gun, I holstered it and ran toward the parlor, calling to Katie from the hall. She was still standing outside the parlor where I had left her. "They went out the window," I said. "I'm going to try to keep them from leaving town." "What can I do to help?" Katie asked. Halfway out the door, I stopped and looked at her. "See if the marshal's back in his office," I said. "If he is, tell him what's happened and ask him to help me find them." I turned to go. "Wait," Katie said. "What if he isn't back yet?" "Come back here and wait for me," I said. "I'll be back." As I pulled the door closed behind me, I heard her say, "You'd better come back, Nate Landry." Since Katie's house had been built at the edge of town, only open country lay to my left. To my right, the street ran all the way to the opposite end of town. Both sides of the street were lined with businesses, and both sides were full of people. Leah and the man with her would be among the people who were walking away from me. Most of the folks that lined the street didn't appear to be in a hurry. I turned down the first alley I came to. When I had reached the path that ran along the backs of the buildings parallel to the main street, I broke into a run. The livery stable stood at the far end of the street, and I needed to reach it before Leah and her companion did. The morning was cool, but damp, and the dark clouds held promise of more rain. By the time I stopped at the back of the livery to catch my breath, I was sweating. As I walked along the side of the building, I searched for anything that looked, sounded, or even smelled wrong. When I reached the street, I leaned against the side of the livery and watched for Leah, but I saw no sign of her or her friend. Still watching, I crossed to the open double doors at the center of the front wall. A few feet from inside the doorway, an old man who resembled a scarecrow sat hunched forward on a wooden keg, smoking a pipe. When he saw me, he smiled, removed the pipe from his mouth, and pointed at me with its stem. "Good morning, young feller," he said. "What can I do for you?" "Good morning," I said. "I was hoping to meet some folks here, but I don't see them." I smiled. "I don't know if I've showed up too early or too late." The old man tapped his pipe against the side of the keg to knock out the ashes. "How many people? And what do these folks look like?" he asked. He pulled a worn leather pouch from one of his vest pockets, loosened a drawstring that held it closed, and began to refill the pipe with fresh tobacco. "A man and a woman," I said. I described Leah. "I've never seen the man before," I said, "and they would have been here within the last half hour." He returned the pouch to his pocket, pulled a lucifer from another pocket, and lit his pipe. Shaking his head slowly, he exhaled a small cloud of smoke. "From the way you described this lady," he said, "I reckon I'd remember seeing her. But she hasn't come through here." I thanked him and had started to leave when a thought struck me and turned me around. "Who works here at night?" I said. "The feller that owns this place," he said, "Bob Stratton." "Where can I find Bob?" I asked. He grinned. "You're talking to him. My night man quit a couple of weeks back, and I ain't found a replacement for him yet." Still grinning, he asked, "You looking for work?" I grinned back at him. "Not today," I said. "These folks rode in late last night. Did they leave the horses here?" He shook his head. Last night was quiet, he said. Nobody came by after 10 o'clock. As I walked down the street toward Katie's place, I thought about seeing Leah. I had seen surprise in her face, but not fear. I reckoned she would have wanted to get out of Phoenix as quickly as possible after discovering I was in town. When I had returned to her room, it was empty except for the breakfast tray. I hadn't paid attention to it at the time, but the coffee cups were still half full, and only 1 or 2 biscuits were missing. Leah and her friend had left through the window before I had finished telling Katie about them. Using the same alley I'd followed on the way to the livery, I arrived at the back of Katie's house. What I found confirmed my suspicions. After learning the location of their room, Leah and her companion had hobbled their horses near the room to provide a quick escape if they needed it. By going to the livery, I would have caught most outlaws before they could leave town. I had forgotten that I was dealing with the Dust Devil. There you have it. There's the start of Book 4 in the Nate Landry series. You can get it at my website if you want an autographed copy, www.marklredmond.com. You can also find it at barnesandnoble.com, kobo.com, walmart.com, target.com, and if you have to, amazon.com. They're not my favorite people. Anyway, I hope you'll grab a copy of this book. If you haven't read the other Nate Landry books with Nate and Wolf, please, you can find them at the same locations I just mentioned. I'd be happy to sign a copy, or they're also available everywhere except on my site in ebook format, and I will be adding the ebook format to my website sometime this year. I hope you have a wonderful day. I'll be talking to you again soon.